So the legislation in the state allows a locality to adopt an ordinance that would require short-term rentals to register or to get a permit in the locality, and also allows a locality to adopt use regulations, which would help to reduce any potentially negative impacts from this use through the adoption of zoning regulations. So the town's ordinance is offered to you, and it's been drafted under the Virginia enabling legislation to regulate land uses through the zoning enabling legislation. Some of the other things that were talked about, which we feel like this ordinance will help the town address, is that right now the town is not receiving revenue for permits, business license and taxes from all. You have many short-term rental owners in the town that follow the rules, right? They get the business license, they pay the taxes just like they're supposed to. And you have some others that we don't know if that is occurring based on these other engines that we've seen. There's rent by owner is one of them, and there was another one that popped up because, just searching for Columbia Beach, there was another engine that popped up. So I think that's important to understand what the impact is, and ensure that the town is being able to collect the taxes just like you do from other transient occupancy uses, such as a motel or hotel. These are also transient occupancy uses. They're just permitted, and they would be permitted by this ordinance in the town in any zoning district. So many of them obviously are in your residential district because people use their home as the short-term rental unit. So with this ordinance, the permitting and use regulations would allow the town to establish the permitting for each short-term rental unit with information on the operator and its location. It would allow you to establish use standards such as for parking, occupancy, and safety. And it also offers tools for enforcement of the regulations so that, again, most people are going to follow the rules. And those that aren't, there would be options for enforcement based on that. And I'll be glad to walk through those, answer any questions you have about it. The Planning Commission with a 5-0 vote recommended approval of this ordinance to you. Staff also recommends approval of this ordinance to you. There are 4 changes that staff is recommending to you. And fortunately, they're all on page 2 of your clean draft. 3 of these we've already discussed. 1 is a new one, and you'll understand it's some repeat language. What we've gone back through and tried to clean up language where it was unclear. There was some duplicate language in here, and we wanted to remove that. So on page 2, if you look at 3A, under 3A, and again, this was in all of your previous versions, we are adding the and operator designee. So we have in here that you have an operator, and then you would have a person, because sometimes the operator or the owner, the host themselves, are not here. They own the property, but they reside somewhere else. They're not available. So this ordinance would require each of those operators to have a designee. And so they would give us that person's contact information with their permit. And so this adds that operator designee in there because it wasn't in there before. Part of that reason is for safety. If it's not intended to be a name, because it's going to come to the town, so it's not intended to be a name that, I'm just using this as an example, but for instance, if one of the renters says, well, my pillow's not soft enough, that they would have somebody to call at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's not intended for that. It is intended to have an operator designee in the case of emergency. These people are not, people that are renting them, are from out of town. So they're visitors. And if something happens, we have to call, obviously they go to call 911. But if there's some other issues that happen with that property or at that property and we need someone to get in touch with during an emergency, this information will be shared with the emergency services folks to be used for that purpose in an emergency. So then you move on down to item 6. Item 6, when it left the planning commission, there was some additional language that was needed to be added. The sign that is the wall sign that would be allowed, the language is inserted in there that it says flush mounted wall sign. And then you'll also see a height, because before it just said a maximum area of 3 square feet, but now the ordinance says flush mount wall signs, 3 square feet are allowed to be a maximum of 8 foot tall. So we just added that language in here. We want to delete item 7. Item 7 refers to 2 substantiated complaints received within a rolling 6-month period. That conflicts with language that is in the section of the ordinance later, which talks about enforcement and penalties. And so that language, they conflict. And so this is the section that we would like to remove, is item 7. There still is in here the language that says if you have 2 or more substantiated complaints, and this is on item 3, including but not limited to noise, parking, and excess trash. It's actually within a rolling 12-month period, not a 6-month period. So if you had more than 2 or more within a 12-month period, then we would look at, what action to take regarding that. And then number 8, we talked about. Number 7, deleting that, is the new item that we did not discuss last month. This next item, item 8, if you look at that item, last month we talked about at the very end, it said, a short-term rental permit is subject to all relevant penalties as set forth by the town, which kind of left it open-ended. And the town attorney advises that's kind of open-ended language, and we really meant by the ordinance, by this ordinance. So that's why you see that language that says set forth by this ordinance. And so with that, staff does recommend approval of this ordinance to you. And so does the planning commission. And so we recommend that the council approve this ordinance this evening, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, I'm going to open up the public hearing at 7:17 p.m. Anybody who's here to speak on the short-term rental agreement, you're welcome to come forward.
I only have Mr. Kelly's email comment, nobody else signed up, but if anybody wants to come up.
Okay. I think Mr. Kelly still wants you to read this. Is that correct, Mr.
Yes.
Kelly?
We'll let her do it because I think it's too emotional.
Oh, okay.
I'll just stop yelling at you.
Oh,
Don't let you do that.
okay, thank you, Mr.
My thinking
Got
is clear.
But I think Ms. Barnhart, do you want to come up?
No, that's fine. I'm here in case you have any questions.
Kelly,
You're most happy to do that.
Mr. Kelly, I'm talking
But
about.
Heather does a wonderful job.
Okay,
You know.
okay, thank you.
Heather, without further ado.
I think there's one person who waved that they want to come up and talk. So,
Please come forward.
yep, and then we'll do Mr. Kelly's comment.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Sandy Rodeheaver, and I live at 704 Kenneth River Avenue. Water.
Hear you. See if the mic's on.
Is it on?
There should be a little. There's a button on the top.
On the button. There we go.
My name is Sandy Rodeheaver, that's better. I live at 704 Plymouth River Avenue in Colonial Beach. And my worry about this, all of this, is parking. That's the biggest worry. I mean, I know they talk about those two spots in front, right in front of the house, but then they had mentioned about if there's needed other parking, where is that other parking gonna be? I mean, I don't quite understand that. If you need more than two, and it says like park on the street, like, I don't know, if it means like Washington Avenue, or, I mean, I have no idea. What do you do if you have more than two? And I'm also worried about people parking, because I've gone through this with boats and trailers and all of that stuff. And I can't remember if that's been addressed either, but we have a lot of that. I mean, the street that I live on, there's 10 houses and there's 5 STR. So it's terrible. I mean, it's just terrible. At the end of my street, there was a wedding not that long ago, 15 cars everywhere, blocking people's driveways. I mean, and that's what I'm afraid of, that's gonna happen. So my big deal is parking. And I don't think they've addressed it enough. I really don't think they have. I don't know what the answer is, but I really don't think it's been thoroughly addressed. And then the other thing is, once this all is in place, we have this great thing that with all the rules and regulations, who's gonna monitor all of it? Who's gonna check things? Who do you call? What's the complaint process? Do you have somebody? I mean, we used to have Teresa. Was that her job where she went around and checked yards or whatever she did? But we don't have anything like that now. There's nobody really to talk to. So who are you gonna report it to? You call town hall, and who are you gonna get? I mean, it's really difficult to reach people, and I've tried to talk to people, and it's hard. I mean, I know people are busy and whatever, but it just doesn't seem like there's one person that really has a handle on all of this. So I think we really need to think about that too. It's really difficult. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead and read Mr. Kelly.
All right, Mr. Kelly wrote in, I have reviewed the proposed short-term rental regulations and offer the following comments. Staff doesn't quite appreciate the investment that individuals have made in Colonial Beach. If there are 120 or so short-term rental properties in town worth at least $250,000 each, that's $30 million in value. These proposed regulations are not how you treat someone that invests $30 million in Colonial Beach. Every short-term rental property is in much better shape today since their conversion to short-term rental. Keep in mind that tenants have the final control over the operation of each property by their reviews after a stay. The proposed regulations make the zoning administrator the most powerful person in Colonial Beach. For example, if an owner has 2 parking infractions during any 12-month period, the zoning administrator has the authority to suspend the STR permit for the property. That gives the zoning administrator the authority to put an owner out of business. The zoning administrator's ruling can be appealed to the BZA, but we all know that will take at least 2 months or more to resolve. What if this happened in the high season? The legislative goal was to get a handle on how many short-term rental operations we have in town. The staff's job is to support the planning commission, not undermine their work with unneeded regulations. Please send this document back to the planning commission for a total rework. Thanks for your consideration of my comments, Mr. Penn.
Any questions?
Anybody else? Okay. All right, I'll close the public hearing at 7:23 PM. Just trying to wake you back up. All right, and open it for discussion, council discussion. Anybody want to go first? Yes, Mr. Wood.
Pardon me. I think it's a good start on a problem that we do have. We had a lot of SDRs that simply didn't have business permits, weren't paying taxes, and paying the fees. So that's a good thing. The only issue that I have with this, and I think it's a well-written document, I think it's a good idea. I'm afraid that the 2 strikes and you're out policy though is a tad stringent. I agree with Joe's assessment that, most of these properties are in better shape than, when they got them. I suspect that the people who are going to have problems with, parking and tenants, leaving trash and all of that stuff, are going to be primarily those folks who are dodging the system. But I would hate to see, I think in a town this small, with a legislative body this small, that if we go with the idea that maybe 4 times, and I don't know what the magic number is, but just instinctively, 2 strikes and you're out doesn't make sense to me. So, I would like for us to have further discussion on that if anyone else feels that way, but 2 is just too few.
I think I want to just go down the line and let everybody have an opportunity to speak. So we'll go next to Mr. Williams and then we'll pass to Ms. Robertson.
Okay. Yes, I have a few questions. Asked a bunch last week, so some of my questions have already been answered, but some of the concerns too from the Economic Development Committee I'll bring as well, since they discussed these. But one of the concerns was about the log and what has to be kept. Could you clarify a little bit, Darla, for those folks out in the audience and for us, council, how that log thing works?
So what we were asking for, and from what I understand in speaking with some of the members of the short-term rental committee who happen to be short-term rental owners, that they ought to already keep a log of who is staying in the home. The reason that we put that in the ordinance is because you don't, again, you're talking about transients coming into the town. Not that that's a bad thing, that's a great thing, they're tourists. So that's a good thing, but I won't go and rent a hotel here without the hotel having a log of who the occupants of that building are. So this is in these types of ordinances for the same reason that you give your name and your information when you're staying somewhere else, is in case there is an incident. If there are, something happens and it's like, well, later there's investigation that needs to happen, not from a zoning standpoint. We're not gonna call Joe that stayed there and say, Joe, you parked in the wrong place. But if there's something that happens that Joe might have been involved in from a safety standpoint, and the police or others need to get in touch with Joe, then we can reach out to the short-term rental owner, or they can reach out to the short-term rental and say, last Tuesday, such and such, who was there? Because we got a report that whatever happened. So that's what the reason is for. And it's not a logbook that we plan to say, okay, well, you must turn the logbook in to the town. It's there. We want to make sure that those records are kept for a safety standpoint in case they're needed.
Okay, that makes sense. One of the things I talked to one constituents, and I kind of agree with this, the complaint thing, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Why are we calling a complaint versus a violation? For example, if somebody from town staff sees that there's a violation of parking or something like that, why would we require just citizens to tell on each other in order to enforce our rules? Shouldn't we call it 2 or more violations versus complaints?
And the language, it's really the language, it says substantiated complaints, which means there was a violation. So that language could be changed to say confirmed violations, if that gives you better ease. But again, a substantiated complaint is a violation. And the town enforces the zoning ordinance now based on complaints. So we haven't been, directed by town management or council to actively enforce the zoning ordinance. So it's done on a complaint basis. This will be enforced on a complaint basis. And so that's why, you see that language. It's gonna come in as a complaint. And when it does, that's when we'll have to investigate it to ensure that it is a substantiated complaint, not just a complaint.
Okay. Also, let's see, I agree with Mr. Wood, we don't agree on everything, but I do agree that the 2 complaints and 1 citizen, like, somebody could easily get their short-term rental kicked out of the neighborhood, with this 2 substantiated complaint thing. So it does seem like a little bit harsh. I don't know if you have any experience with other localities, but couldn't the town just say, council agree to pass a set of rules, like maybe separately from this, and then they could address it at various times versus putting it in the ordinance? But to me, okay, they left their trash out. Was that a good enough reason to kick them out of the neighborhood? Versus, okay, for 3 weeks in a row, party every night, just totally disturbing the neighborhood. It seems like 2 completely different levels. Can we not, or is your experience, do towns not have different levels of severity? Like a penalty, maybe a penalty for trash, you see what I'm saying?
I do. In my experience, there are some localities that have, Bedford County, Virginia has basically 3. Again, it's a substantiated complaint, violation. So they have 3, until some action would be taken. There are other options, I guess. And again, it's for your discussion, but weighing the difference between, is trash left more or less a nuisance than, someone parked in where they shouldn't be parked. So that's something certainly that council could discuss. What the other option would be is that right now, the responsibility for an appeal to this or a determination about suspensions lies solely on the zoning administrator. It wouldn't have to be solely the zoning administrator's decision. It could be something that comes, goes to the zoning administrator and the town manager, or something else. I don't know if, that's an option as well. Or that, I guess the BZA really considers appeals, but it could be, maybe something that goes to the BZA in making that determination, planning commission, if that's a concern.
It just to me, it seems.
Don's got a point.
Yeah, Councilman Woods, I just want to point out that on page 3, where we're talking about STR permits, but assuming the STR permit may be suspended or canceled for the following reasons. It's not a fait accompli if somebody has 2 minor violations or more. They're probably going to get a phone call from us, or we'll engage with them to say, here's what the ordinance says. We want to work with them. We want we want to be coaches on this. We're not going after anybody. The intent is to make them aware of it. They're doing something inconsistent with the code. So this is not a may, it's a shall.
It's a may, not shall.
It's a may, not a shall. Yes.
And so would your office potentially write out something clarifying some of these rules, so it's not so vague? In this, it's fairly vague, but would your office have more of a set of guidelines that you follow? So when you're substantiating these complaints, you're not just being random about it, you're being methodical. Okay, somebody came in, it's a parking violation, 5 cars in the yard. This is what we do every time, that kind of stuff, potentially?
Yes, I think that's something we would want to do, again, to obtain voluntary compliance. So we would send a letter out if there is a substantiated complaint, or using your example of trash, to advise on the ordinance. This is what the code requires. If we wanna meet or talk more about it, we can to make sure that there's an understanding, but doing it in a tactful way. It's not meant to be mean-spirited or to try to crush somebody by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay, and there's just one last thing, since parking's come up over and over again. Is there anything we can do to help? I'm sure you've heard the citizen complaints. Is there anything we can do to help with that? I know you said the permit is on file, so they'll have the ability to see how many spaces are allowed, but like, what if they park boats and trailers and all that out in front of the neighborhood, blocking people's driveways? But is that also considered in that, even though it's not in their space, it's on the street public parking? Is there a way to help with that?
So I would respond to that to say, as we talked about earlier this month, is to say, they are going to be required to show on the short-term rental permit the parking spaces. That is going to have to be confirmed with the number of the occupancy that's permitted. And however, if people that are there staying or parking, blocking the roads and things, then that would be a safety call to the police department. If travel lanes are being blocked by boats and RVs and other things, that's another issue. Now, are the renters allowed to park on the public road where others are allowed to park? We discourage it in the ordinance, but we can't prohibit it because it is a public road, a public right of way. Again, I think that if there are, and if we get complaints about, people that are blocking roads and things, then we are going to advise that person who made the complaint, the next time that happens and they're blocking the road, please contact the police department. But then, we'll also follow up with that with the operator of the short-term rental to make sure they understand that too.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
My concern is, I'd like to hear from Public Works and the chief, Diane and the chief, as to how you feel about the impact that this is going to have to the town.
From a public safety standpoint, having a high number of short-term rentals could be problematic because you have a transient population. Right now, we have a few bed and breakfasts, a couple of hotels, and I don't know how many short-term rentals. But short-term rentals are not known to the police department like the bed and breakfast and the hotels are. We know those locations, they're very well publicized, there's only a handful of them. If we start adding several dozen to hundreds of short-term rentals, that exponentially could potentially make our job of public safety much more difficult.
Especially on a weekend that's got a lot of activity to it.
Correct. And there's no real way to go back to the point that she was just making about parking in the roadway and other things. I don't know that there'd be a way for us to adequately notify them that we issued X number of tickets for whatever on Marshall to see if it falls in line with one of the short-term rentals or not. That's not a statistic that we're currently tracking, nor do we have a mechanism to track currently.
Thank you.
I think my concern would be the trash pickup. We already have these issues, and I think that if we identify these short-term rentals and do somewhat of an education campaign, I know when you rent on Airbnb or some of the other online sites, there's an area there for the rental owner to say, trash must be carried out or trash, whatever the rules are. So I think it would allow us maybe a little bit more structure on something like that. We do get those questions now at Public Works, and we take them one at a time and try to educate these folks one at a time. But I think it might be a benefit to us to be able to do that as a group.
Thank you.
Right? And the back section, or you gonna make them go?
Start on that.
Either way.
I don't have a lot of questions because I've been through this process and listened and listened and listened, and I feel like I have a good understanding on it. I used to have short-term rentals. I no longer do. It's been several years. My rentals have all been over 30 days. I do understand all of the concerns of both the citizens and the short-term rental owners. I particularly understand the concern was the zoning administrator in any town is a very powerful position. And I do understand the concern that people, that if a lot of people complain, not because they were really legitimate complaints, but because they didn't want a short-term rental next door to them, that could be problematic. I don't know what the solution to that is. I am not saying that I wouldn't be in favor of doing some more modifications, but right now we have nothing. We have nothing on the books that enables us to enforce anything, right? And so this is a first step. One of the things that I wanted to bring out, if there is an event being held at a short-term rental, then that may require an event permit. Most short-term rental owners that I know don't allow events at their short-term rentals because they're usually a disaster, especially if you have to turn that thing over for the next day. They just don't allow that. There was one more point I was gonna make and now I've forgotten what it was. So this is something that gives us the opportunity to be able to require registrations to shut people down if they don't get their permit. I mean, that's the biggest thing. I don't think shutting people down because of a couple of complaints is going to be the teeth that's most important to us. I think it's, hey, you don't register this, then we're gonna shut you down. You know, that's the big thing that I see this ordinance doing. Parking in this town is always a disaster. When I have a crab feast at my house, you know, the people are parking all up and down the street. That's my private residence. I only do it once every couple of years, you know, but if there's something in there that says that they can't have events in these short-term rentals, or if there's some occupancy or something like that, then that may help with that particular issue. Because somebody did have a wedding at one of my short-term rentals one time and it was a disaster. But they didn't tell me that in advance. They signed the thing that said that they wouldn't have an event there and then they did. So, you know, that doesn't happen very often, although the market is changing. It used to be that this market was the highest, the people that rented short-term through Airbnb or VRBO or privately because they go back to the same cottage year after year after year for 10 years, they really took care of those properties as if they were their own. And that is changing a little bit. There are a lot of people renting short-term rentals now that treat them like a hotel room. But that's something that the investor, that the person that has this business is gonna have to deal with and is gonna wanna deal with. So I'm looking for a balance here, and that's all I'll say for now.
Well, I'm perhaps fortunate or not so fortunate not having any rental property. But question for Pal, and I apologize that I've only run this by you earlier, but I suspect that there are some members of this council who do in fact own short-term rentals. Is there a potential transactional conflict of interest if you are owning that property and voting for this ordinance? Or is there any requirement for disclosure over and above the statement of economic interest if you're going to vote on this ordinance? I'm sorry, I'm going to go with this, I'm sorry, but.
I guess looking at it, from a practical
standpoint. I mean, you vote in favor of this ordinance, you're imposing more obligations on yourself. So if you vote against it because you don't want obligations as an owner, then that might create conflict more so. I think it would be good if somebody has short-term rentals to dispose that before the vote. But this is an overall policy. I don't think it should just prevent somebody from voting.
I assume the legislative statement would be common interest, but you would suggest disclosing it before anyone?
Yeah.
This,
So I just have a couple questions. For use regulations, 11C, we designate that renters should not be over 21 years of age or under 21 years of age. Is there a reason why we picked 21 besides 18, 25, whatever that?
That's the same, the reason for that is that you have to be 21 years old to rent a room at a hotel.
18.
Oh, well, in localities like I do know in some localities, you have to be 21 to rent a motel room. Because my son was rejected when he was mad at me. That's how I know. And it was funny to me because he wasn't 21. May not be the policy of all, but that's why that. And you really want to kind of avoid, if you will, the 18, I just graduated, from high school crowd. So, I mean,
Next question would be is the 12C where it talks about refusal to operate, and go through all that, but part of that is the designee to enter the dwelling unit upon a minimum 24-hour advance notice. I personally think we should stick with like a standard 2-day, 48-hour type thing. A lot of times maybe the appointee or the operator may not be available, so requiring a 24-hour may be a little harsh for them. So, I mean, usually when we do things, it's standard 2-day business day type things, so 48 hours probably seems more applicable. The other part of this is, we have a lot of this talking about, like for the same thing, town is in compliant investigation, including allowing the zoning administrator or designate to enter. Personally, I think it should be the town manager, and they may designate the zoning administrator to do this, as well as the suspension or cancellation. That should be, if the town manager has the ability to cancel a business license, not necessarily a zoning administrator, I think the individual should be the town manager doing this, with the zoning administrator as their appointee to find the suspicion or cancellation or the suspension to them. And my other question was, we deleted the 7, so that was my other question. That's all.
Okay. To Tom's point, I'll disclose I own a short-term rental. I've owned short-term rental for 7 years, 8 years. Also, I'm happy to abstain from the vote yes to it, or whatever. So however that works out legally, I don't mind whatever has to happen for that. My true interest is in just making sure, I think that ordinance is important to protect our hospitality industry, like our actual hotels, B&Bs, to put a little bit more, put some more rails on this SDR thing. I think it's not fair to our hospitality industry that these get to kind of run rampant in this way. So that's one thing in its favor, but there's I do have some concerns about how we're gonna administer this. I'd like to see what the form would look like. You know, I'm not trying to get in the weeds on that, it's just hard for me to picture how the staff that we already have part-time in our zoning office, that's only open to the public 2 or 3 days a week, is actually going to administer something that adds a lot more regulation. You know, we already have a peer lease program that requires us to individually be in contact and getting people's information to get back to us, and that is just a constant struggle. I know there've been a lot of ideas from citizens and staff people on good intentions to reach out to people to get like a community calendar and things like that, and just getting information from people. It's just, I mean, it's just not that easy, and it doesn't seem to come together easily, and it seems to be an enormous time burden. I'm a little concerned that the ordinance just keeps honest people honest, but doesn't really take the step that what it needs to do, which is gonna be the enforcement piece of it, of people that are not compliant, because we already have in place the business license requirement, and how many people of the 130 short-term rentals are skirting that requirement? I mean, I have a business license for my short-term rentals, and I'm following all the rules and paying all the taxes, and I know there are a lot of very, very good stewards of these SDRs. I know that, but I don't know how many aren't. I have no clue, and I'm not sure that we've ever really figured that out from staff side. So before, and I guess, you know, I don't know, maybe I don't have a vote in it, and that's fine. But I'd like to see, is that business license procedure actually being enforced before we go to a next step of ordinance regulation, that whether or not we have the capability to actually do it, you know, and I think, that I'm sure the planning commission has discussed that, and like to do about administration of it. And just that, you know, just the fact that it's a huge lift on the department, and, in that part. The guest log question, Ms. Williams had, I think, is a guest log that's already just who rented your place on your digital platform fine? Or do you have to have them physically sign a guest log?
If they have that list already, it's a record.
Yeah.
Because we changed the term logbook. The ordinance draft originally said logbook. And so then we had some discussions and great input. And it was like, well, wait a minute, does it have to be like a logbook separate from what we already have as the record of who rented our place? And the answer to that is no. That would be, it would be that same record that you have for those rentals.
And I apologize, I have not been following the discussions, which have been lengthy on the commission meetings, which I know have put a lot of time and effort into this ordinance, and I appreciate all the people that have participated in that. I don't see Mr. DeMonte here, but I've heard he's been active at it, and I know Councilmember Williams and Dr. Sullivan have been as well. So I'm sorry if I get a little repetitive on so yeah, I have, one of the questions is, if we have 130 rentals, how many of those actually have business license? And let's try to see compliance level on that. I think that'd just be a good gauge on what we're gonna see compliance level in this. If we have a license for it, it's gotta be a fillable form online. I'm pushing the technology hard. We've got to make this as easy as humanly possible. If it is not a fillable form online, that it's not easily filled out, then you're gonna be pulling at hair to try to get people to give you this information. Is there a due date? When are we looking to kind of enact this? Like, when does it become effective? I'm assuming not this season. I mean, it's too late, so.
The proposal would be that it would be May 1st to April 30th each year which is the same time frame for business license.
Very familiar with that as well. I get both. One for my rental and one a business license for my. Just to get a little bit more on some of the details of some of these things, the SDRs, we did require them to pay a commercial trash fee, not a residential trash fee, because there is we believe a greater impact on having these in-outs of people. They bring a lot of food with them and then they throw it all out at the end of the week instead of like somebody who lives in their house doesn't do that. But we can't charge them that trash fee for their additional impact if they're not paying for a business license because we don't know where they are. Right? So all of these pieces go into administration of this. I think the chief brought up a very good point that he would need a map of where these are. That might be helpful to his job. So this would help us get a map of that. I think we're getting locations. We're compiling more data about that. So that might be helpful to please. I actually think this is gonna reduce SDRs, not add SDRs to the town. So it's just, I think adding regulation is gonna turn people away from doing it rather than adding more. So I don't know if we should be so focused on how many more there will be. I think there might damper it. I agree with Mr. Williams that a substantial complaint, if it's a violation, call it a violation. Let's make that verbiage consistent throughout. I like the word violation better than complaint also, so be on board with that. On 3A, where it says operator and operator designee, I'd like it to say local operator designee. I don't want them to designate somebody who's not around here. We're asking for somebody who's gonna have a local point of contact, let's put that word local. I know it's getting a little bit of the weeds on it, but, do we have houses on septic tanks? I was just wondering where 3B came from. Okay, very good. We have houses on septic?
There's a few. I don't think any of, unless Darla knows something I know, I wouldn't imagine they're affected by this, but there are a few.
There are a few, but
Two?
I don't know if they have short-term rentals there or not. Because they haven't registered.
I mean, I almost just delete the, we got that in, I mean, it almost implies as if people are allowed to have septic. I don't know, you know what I mean? But okay.
Yeah, I mean, a person could develop or have a house on one property, even more than two. If they got the proper approvals, of course, the town would want the connectivity to.
All right, we'll leave it there, that's fine.
It's just a
It's
coverall,
like
if
a-
you will,
yeah.
in case that happens in the future.
All right, on number 6, it says, I think you guys did this, put in the flush mounted wall sign. I would like to say or blade hanging. Lots of our houses in Clintwood Beach are traditionally named, so part of our culture here. And it's very common to have a hanging blade sign, not just in fact, it's less common to have a flush mount sign than the hanging blade sign. Good with next in number 7. C, about the 18 or 21. I know it's 18 because I've rented places at 18. I never got in trouble doing it. I'm sure people do. I know people get in trouble. I got a lady that comes and rents my place that's 40 years old that gets in trouble. So I don't know that matters sometimes. She's a lot. So anyway, I don't know, whatever about that. I thought that was a good point to make. On 12B, getting into the complaint part. When it says 2 or more, and I think we've kind of had some echoing results of that, rather than the rolling 12 months, what if we do a 3-month period? I would rather, if we're gonna get into, let's crack down on if it's a real nuisance. If it is a complete regular problem nuisance in a 3-month period of time, like 3 complaints in 3 months, that thing's gotta stop now. I don't want it to go on a year to find out if it's got a second complaint or not. You see what I'm saying? So 3 complaints in 3 months, and maybe I'm just throwing language out there, we can discuss that. But if you shorten the time period, then you're not waiting a whole year to decide whether or not this is a problem in the community. Otherwise, it's gonna continue to be a problem in the community until the year time. I agree with Mr. Allison about the 48 hours in advance. On C, on 13, it almost rewrites 12, but it does say, I know Mr. Dooley said in 12, it says an STR permit may be suspended or canceled. But in 13, it very specifically says that on the first violation, you get a written warning. On the second violation, you get 90 days to resolve it. And on the third one, you're out. So that seems in conflict with 12. With the may, with the, giving discretion to that, to Mr. Williams' point, like we just had trash bag out twice and now we said no.
Do you want me to respond?
No, I mean, either way, whatever.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that we could change the language in there to say may, but the introduction to that sentence, it says unless otherwise determined by the zoning administrator, so.
Yeah, but I've seen this play out before.
Well, just to say a little bit about, enforcement, I know that there was some discussion about zoning enforcement, and I, we do look at complaints that come in. They have to be substantiated, they have to be found to be true violations. And we are accustomed to times when someone may be complaining for the sake of complaining. We, with experience, you do learn from an enforcement standpoint what that difference is. But, so I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, it's just kind of prescriptive in 13, and we kind of just had a discussion about not being prescriptive like that and allowing it to be administratively guidance. I think Ms. Williams' point about having that as within the office.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all my comments. Take it or leave it. Everybody can take it or leave it. I'll open it back on this side. I'll Mr. Williams first, and I'll go.
I just had a question, because you had a lot of suggestions there, but how does that work? Because it's kind of rewriting a lot of little chunks of this, and as a council, we have to make a motion for each change, right?
I
That's a
agree,
lot.
yeah, it's just
They are rewriting the whole ordinance for the whole entire town.
it was a few pieces, and I don't think that, I'm not asking for that to get changed for the second, but rather that those points can be up for discussion. If there's no interest in taking them up, then fine, and if there is, then, we can focus it on.
Madam Mayor? I would suggest that I know they've been taking very good notes, and taking their consideration, that they bring this back to us for a reread. I haven't heard any substantial changes that would require another public hearing, but Mr. Duggan might want to comment on that.
Depends on the changes that they make. I don't know what changes they'll make, but they can do a reread. I mean, right now, you haven't changed anything. So if you bring it back and have maybe more answers to some of the
If we got it back at the work session, and it could be made available even if a public hearing wasn't required, to have public comment at that work session and then bring it up for a vote at our next meeting, would that give enough time to deal with all of this?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not really, I guess I can't vote anyway, but I'm not particularly comfortable with filling more questions about those things. I thought everybody here brought up some questions. Yeah.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, it's pretty obvious the cake isn't baked yet. So I would move that we table this for the time being and wait for recommendation from the planning commission and have a little more fulsome discussion, and then I think we'll be in better shape. Gotcha.
I do think the planning commission and the committee, and I know Mr. Mag is here, I know it's been a lot of work, so I just really appreciate that. I don't want that to get missed.
Madam Mayor, if I might just get clarification on the comments to
Sure.
table it for staff to make revisions based on your discussion this evening.
Table voting on it.
Right, yes, sir. And you, and that staff would make modifications based on this. One option would be, as far as the different changes that have been talking about and keeping notes on these, probably, we've been keeping good notes on that. Most of them, to me, except for, you're increasing the 48 hours. Other things you're changing, like changing substantiated complaints to violations. We are deleting or adding the town manager as the person with the zoning administrator appointee. And then, to do if it comes to a suspension, we're changing the language to say may. If we deleted item 13, which is not necessary to have this prescriptive language in there that says, well, this is gonna happen and this is gonna happen, we'll work through that as this occurs, then I think that, the rest of the changes we could probably walk through if you want to this evening. If you feel more comfortable, we can work these up and have them ready for your work session, so.
Point of order.
Yes.
The motion to table hasn't been seconded. We don't need to table it. We can just fail to take action tonight and instruct staff to come back, if that's the desire of council.
I think that's kind of where we're going, and I think Ms. Odom's summary of the points that were discussed tonight, and I just feel like consensus on was Ms. Odom's description of those, in agreement for that, we'll come back to this stuff. Tom? Oh, yeah, Ms. Williams.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused. I watched the planning commission go through this, and they just went line by line and said, yes, we agree or disagree, and they went and passed one by one. So what is our suggestion? Like, every comment we made, they're gonna go back and put it back in here, and we're gonna vote on the thing? Or are we gonna vote on each? Because I think it's important, because the planning commission did that. I feel like we should do that too, if we're gonna make substantial changes to what has been months of work. That's my concern.
So as far as how you vote, I would have to defer to the town attorney for that. We can, and I think you can do it either way. It has come to you as a package, it can come back to you as a package with the changes that you have discussed this evening, highlighted for you so that they're clear.
Oh, and then we could go line by line if you want at the next work session.
don't
I think it would be a little
Right.
ad hoc to do it tonight.
Madam Mayor, the one thing that was a little bit maybe tedious or uncertain for staff is you provided several suggestions for changes. I don't know if that reflects the general majority's thinking
I agree, yeah.
or not. And to Councilman
Right.
Williams' point, for some of those items, it would be helpful for staff to sort of get a better sense of where the council is. So when I'm bringing back to an ordinance that is not in general alignment with the council's direction.
I think that's a good point.
You can have my consensus that I don't have any major problems with any of the suggestions that have been made by other council members.
Tom, how do you feel about any of the suggestions? Okay?
Yep.
Kenny seems good.
Can we have a list of those? So we have.
Well, so that's why it would be better to bring that back to the work session with them highlighted.
But
What we'll do is we'll go back to the minutes and then we'll write out what those issues were. and
I
how
can
we
go back
address
there
those.
quickly if you
I
want.
feel like there's only a couple of substantial changes, so that's why I just want to be clear, when we leave, you guys go back and draft, there's no major.
We're going to,
Striking all number 13, is that,
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I feel like everybody on this side just said they're consistent with that, but I think, are there two, or are there particular ones that you think we need to?
well, you were talking about, I think probably a lot of the council would agree on certain things like the violation versus, I don't know about, you changed something from 48 hours to.
Oh,
24
Kenny
hours.
suggested to go from 24 to 48.
So there's that's significant, I guess, but, I don't know, can you think of any others, you guys are more familiar with those than me, what real significance? I just want, because of all the work that's gone into it, I want to make sure that we're clear on the significance.
Madam Mayor, the big issue is the changing from 2 violations in 12 months
I agree.
to 3 violations in 3 months, or whatever we want to do with that. So maybe if council members could weigh in on that to give
Yeah,
some direction.
as far as from a staff standpoint, we would suggest that you don't do 3 violations in 3 months. That time period is very short.
Right.
So if you did 3 violations, however many violations in a 6-month period,
Okay.
if you prefer that versus a 12-month period.
How do people
You
feel
know, I
about
think that
that?
you want to,
I can live with that.
and I would say from a staff standpoint, you still want to have some teeth into it.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I mean, we're, you know,
Yeah.
because again, we're also not saying shall.
Mr. Kelly, we're speaking up there. Thank you.
We're not, you know, so, I mean, I can walk through what I have, or we can bring back, or I can do both, we can bring back what we have at your work session.
Can you just let us know what the significant things in your eyes, the significant things?
So we talked about on page 2, we talked about, 3A. There was a suggestion in front of the and local operator designee. And I don't, you know, I think that we probably have to make sure that we're all clear on what local operator designee means. So that's something that we'd have to think about from a staff standpoint, what that means. Is local, must be a town of Colonial Beach resident, is local, you know, within, you know, some,
Yeah, and not just like in Tahiti.
right.
Something within like a 50-mile radius or something.
Sounds reasonable. You can get here in an hour. I mean, there's something really wrong happening, right, from the public safety standpoint.
And so we have that, so we will try to add that language relative to how we're defining local into the definition, which is on page 1, item A4, operator designee. And so that probably will be added to the definition because it won't be necessary in here because operator designee will be defined to include local and what that means. So we already talked about also the flush mounted wall sign. There was some discussion about a blade hanging sign. So that is something that, if that is something everybody wants us to look at, I mean, and I'll be honest with you, we can look at that. That may be something that the ordinance is good, and then we need to think about signage, and that's something that we can introduce. But we will look at the hanging sign and how that's worded in the zoning ordinance to try to make that fit within the same or reasonable size. I don't know if 3 feet is it.
You know, the flush mounted was
Yeah.
taken right out of the code because that's what the code allows for in residential.
Yes, there's a
zones. That's why
code
we
for
make that.
blade hanging sign, yeah.
Right, so we will, so that's an item that is everybody, you know, on board with
So
adding.
we okay with
What is
blade?
it, is that the one that sticks out from the
So
house?
let's take out and then have like brackets and then it hangs below it.
Or it hangs from the,
Or it hangs from the top
Do you have
and
the rooms?
then hangs down.
Yeah, I don't have any objections.
But there's something in there about hanging versus functional. So anyway, that's one thing to discuss. Right, everybody wants us to look at adding,
I'm seeing full consent,
Yeah,
I
I
think,
don't
on
have an issue.
Yeah.
We're fine.
okay? So then we were deleting item 7. Item 8 is the item that just, instead of it says, in saying by the town, it says by this ordinance, that was no change. There was,
Let it see.
in 11,
10A is
Um,
also 24 hour.
I just added a note, and I don't know if this was a change or not, that short-term rentals have commercial trash fees. So I didn't propose to add any language in this, like, the commercial trash fee.
No, that's fine. I didn't mean for that. I was just a point.
So under 12,
I got 11C. Are we going 18 or 21?
oh,
Bingo.
18 or 21.
18 or 21.
Yes.
I didn't hear you respond.
Is it?
I think that if 18 is the legal age of adulthood, that moving up to 21 is arbitrary. A lot of Airbnb owners I know, you have to be 35.
Oh, we can check.
And that's their personal,
Right.
yeah.
Right, we can check to see, for some reason, I thought that more recently, like within the last so many, I don't know.
It might be that particular lodging's personal policy.
Mhm.
Do you see what I'm saying? But to Karen's point, some Airbnb owners may have a 25 age rental limit,
Some
but that's
may,
on.
but they can do
be
that.
more restricted.
I'm not 100% sure that it's not a requirement
Oh, okay.
now, since, a lot of things changed to 21, you got 21 to. I'm thinking that this was one of them as well, but we will double check that. But, so the question is 18 or 21? Is everybody, if we just go with 18, is that something y'all are like,
Yeah,
yes, look
honestly,
at that?
if we can go with whatever our hotels have to do. I mean, we don't want to, certainly we don't want to encourage 18-year-old parties. And secondly, we don't want to put our hoteliers at a disadvantage.
Okay. So we will double check that. And then, let's see, we had under 12, I think that was all under 11. And then we had under 12 that, 12B.
You want 2 in 6 months or 3 in 6 months? 3 in 6 months. 3 in 6 months. I'm seeing 3 in 6 months.
Violations,
Yeah.
changing the word to violations in 3 and 6 months.
David, how you feel about that? Yeah, David
So
says yes.
that gives the, whoever's enforcing it a rule that, I mean, they can still, again, it says may.
Yeah.
It doesn't say they're gonna shut you down automatically, but it might give a little bit more security to the Airbnb, or VRBO, whatever they're renting it to, the short-term rental.
Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Then we have 48 hours advance notice in 12C. But we also were gonna look at the language in here that says, the zoning administrator in 12C, we were changing 24 to 48. And this allows the zoning administrator or their designee, but you want that to say town manager. Or their designee.
This is just about entering the dwelling unit. I think the zoning administrator should still stay.
Well, my concern about that is you're addressing one point of the ordinance, and there are other points of the ordinance that give the zoning administrator certain authority. So you need to make sure anything you do doesn't conflict with the ordinance as a whole.
I think that Pal's point, the zoning ordinance is enacted by the zoning administrator, and so we may not have the ability to give the town manager authority under the zoning ordinance. It's not like the town code. I think that's how, is that
Well,
kind of,
I just think you should be consistent throughout as to who has authority to enforce the town zoning ordinance. That you shouldn't have one chapter enforced by somebody and another chapter enforced by somebody else.
I'm fine with leaving it zoning administrator. I know this is your
I think it
suggestion.
has to say the zoning administrator. If, you can also get into the weeds with policies. And, having policies that would prevent abuse.
Well, and
But
if
it doesn't
you
have to be
suspected
an
abuse,
ordinance,
then that report would go, if you suspect abuse by the zoning administrator, then, and you hear that, then that complaint would go to the town
Right.
manager. to say, wait a minute, is this person, you know?
Right, there are ways to do that, yes.
It's, just wanted to make the point that the zoning administrator, works with other town staff as well for advice, as far as, doing their job as well, so that it will not be a surprise to the town manager if the zoning administrator discovers that there's an issue that requires or necessitates them to look inside somebody's house, if there's a violation or request made. So it's not going to be done in a vacuum.
What about the 48-hour notice?
I'm fine with 48 hours.
48? You're gonna tell the other one?
So there is another one in 10A that talks about the town may inspect any short-term rental within 24-hour notice. That we can just make sure that all of them are consistent with 48 hours.
Yes.
And then you said 13, because you already have it. Is there, everybody okay with that? Yeah. Is there anything else? Is there anything else? Okay.
One other quick point on there is, you had asked about what the zoning permit application is gonna look like. We're not gonna have the ability to provide that form for you, but what I will tell you is that administratively, we're gonna design a form that implements the requirements that you all are gonna look at adopting. So we're not gonna do anything outside of what is required here in the ordinance.
Okay, I just want to make sure it can be electronically filled out. My point, that it's easy to do, that you're not putting a requirement within that application where people, the more complicated you make the request of the application, the less likely you're gonna have participation. We already probably have an issue with this.
Staff wants the same thing, that this needs to be efficient for somebody to do when the process.
That was my point out. Yeah.
The only other recommendation I would have is providing the short-term rental operator or local operator appointee like a brochure of guidelines of what constitutes a violation, so that they know if it happens, they know what the problem is ahead of time. If 15 cars show up, they automatically going to know that that's going to be a violation, right? So we can provide guidelines ahead of time, and not to the back end that says, oh, by the way, you didn't do this right. Well, they didn't know, so.
Yes, sir, thank you.
When I read it in Charlottesville, there was a sheet like that provided to the rentee.
Right.
That said that, so that was, anyway, yeah, that's very good. Okay, so I think the direction, just to get consensus on this, is the motion is failed, you're gonna come back with the points that have been made at the next work session. Sound good? Darla's like, just pass it.
No, that's fine. No, we do need to make these changes, we want to get it right for them, so that's a good thing.
Just to clarify, there was no motion made to approve it. The motion to table it failed for lack of a second, and we've instructed staff to bring us something back.
Correct. Okay. I'm gonna move forward with the public hearing on the exemption, ordinance number 749. Mr. Duncan, are you ready to send this?
Yes. So the Virginia Code allows localities to give relief to people who have low income or who are disabled for taxes, real estate taxes. So this addresses that. The ordinance in the past had a set income amount for this, and so we were trying to be consistent with what we did with water and sewer, which was to base it on HUD's very low income criteria. So that's what this does. Now, I have not changed the amount of the award from $600 that's still $600. And I know there's some discussion around that last time. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and open the public comment that we have on the agenda. Public comment is open at 8:23. I'm looking at the date, not the time. Anybody? Okay. Do we have anybody? Okay,
Sign ups.
close at 8:24, then, their motion to accept it as written by Mr. Duffy.
So,
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? I think there was a point made about percentages versus dollar amount, but it actually was to the disadvantage of the participants of the program, not the advantage to them. So we're gonna just stick with the dollar amount, which is actually good. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Disposition of town property, Madison Street Extension. We've been waiting here all this time.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and honorable council members. The issue before you tonight is whether to accept an offer from Mr. Woodruff to purchase a portion of the Madison Street extension. You have before you an image which council indicated during the last transaction that the images provided by the appraisal were insufficient. So we took the drawing of the lines from the appraisal and overlaid it over a map. So there's no question as to what each party wishes to sell or buy. That's emphatically clear. And you also have before you an ordinance authorizing the sale. And just some points on the offer. The offer is for the full appraised value of $11,575. And Mr. Woodruff has already agreed to the town retaining easements, which was determined by Public Works during the staff investigation to be a water easement, sewer easement, and drainage easement. So there aren't any issues there. And the impact of these sale proceeds, marginal increase in tax base, and then reduced liability and cost of maintenance for that portion of Madison Street. And therefore, staff recommends that council adopt ordinance number 750 to authorize the mayor to execute the necessary documents to complete the sale, sorry. And those documents will mainly be the land sale contract and then the deed. And just another point on the benefits of transactions that the parcel itself, it's half the parcel actually of the Madison Street extension will be combined with the parcel to the left of it under image, or I guess depending on how you're looking at it, above it, with the Ice House Brewery and Marina property, which is one of the town's newest and fastest growing businesses. So when the council was assessing disposing of town property, and it can benefit both the town and one of our biggest and fastest growing new businesses, that's something that should be considered as well. Thank you. Oh, and the ordinance needs one small clerical change. I double checked everything twice, but Mr. Woodruff's name. Would you please state your name for the record, sir? David Charles Woodruff II. Okay. That's the only change. Thank you.
So we got it in a second. Okay. Yep. Oh, no, I have to do a public hearing by law. Public hearing on ordinance 750 is now open at 8:27 p.m. Anybody here to speak on that?
There was nobody signed up.
Okay, seeing none, I'll close it at 8:28. Tom, are you making a motion?
I move we adopt ordinance number 750.
Okay, is there any further discussion?
I have one question.
Yes?
When you're looking at this, holding it so that you can read subject and the wording, the ice house is above it and there is what looks like a dwelling below it. Is this gonna take away any ingress or egress available to that house?
So one of the reasons that the line is where it is, if we're holding how you just were, on this side is to ensure that the dwellings still have access. I believe that structure is not a dwelling, Mr.
It's a storage shed.
Storage shed. So ingress and egress is not an issue in terms of easement protection.
Thank you.
Do you own it?
Yes.
And this is a boundary line adjustment, which means you're gonna extend your property to include this. This is a new parcel.
Yeah, we would add this to the brewery property 119.
You're gonna get a resurvey?
One of the requirements of the land sale contract would be for Mr. Woodruff to execute a lot line adjustment / consolidation plan to be submitted with the deed for recordation, along with the ordinance.
Sounds good. Is there any further discussion?
Oh, just a
Yes,
question.
Mr. Ray.
So does the rest of that goes up to Marshall Avenue, the rest of that section, does that continue to be town roadway or what is that?
The part that is not being purchased, that of Madison Street going to Monroe Bay, will remain town property.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, all in favor? Any opposed? That's great. All right, next up is the designated outdoor freshman area license renewal.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, and honorable council members once again. So we have before you two sources of data. First is, looks like this, the visitation data, citizen strolls. This is from a brand new software program that the town is currently piloting, and staff is still being trained on exactly how it works and how to best use it, and ways that it can potentially help us make data-driven decisions, which has been a major initiative since the time Andrew Adams Jacobs was hired. We try to provide as much data as we can for these matters, and so this is just an attempt to do that. So you can see, I picked 4 sip and stroll dates, and it actually tells you how many people visited. And so this data, I want you to know, is geographically focused on the approved sip and stroll DORA zone itself. So basically the entire downtown area, the beach, and the boardwalk that's within the zone. And you can see when that versus last year number shows the increase from that day of the prior year. So it doesn't go by date. It says if it's the second Friday of this month, it compares to the second Friday of that month from the prior year. And then also at the bottom left, it says versus previous Friday. That just shows you versus last week. And then to show other variables that may be impacting visitation, it shows you weather and holidays and all that kind of stuff. So as indicated, this data is specifically limited to the DORA sip and stroll zone. Now, the second page you have is meals tax aggregate summaries from 2022 and 2023 for months in which there was more than one sip and stroll day. And as you can see, there were relatively large increases in all of those months since 2022. And now the issue, the challenges with this data is that this is not limited to just the DORA zone, as the other data set was. This is the overall entire town, and there's no way to put up that data without giving up proprietary information, because there's so few participants to be able to figure out exactly who it was and know more than we should when we publish it. Basically, because of that, a lot of this might be because of new businesses that have been established and not necessarily sip and stroll. But what I'm trying to do is piece together different data sources that in aggregate demonstrate the success of this program, which was our pilot year. And to provide an additional data source, if it may please the mayor, I was going to invite 3 business owners to speak for 1 to 2 minutes on the successes of DORA for them.
Come on up.
Okay, so first I'd like to invite Lori Ford from Kobe Workspace.
Members of council, I'm Lori Ford, Kobe Workspaces. I live at 1344 4th Street, but I probably have Kobe Workspaces more than my home these days. Being a new business, and the sip and stroll, became a festive event with the rebirth of Hawthorne Avenue. And it was nice that all the businesses there collaborated together around that one night to send businesses up and down the street, especially on our walk nights. That was the night that I mostly participated in. But because of some of the events that came around the Sip and Stroll were drawings for people if they made purchases, you would think that I wouldn't have sold anything as a workspace, but I was able to sell day passes because of this. And I contribute that to the Sip and Stroll and the works of that committee, pushing for people to buy from the vendors and all too. So I saw it as an overall success for my business, so thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Chris Lumpkin from Colonial Beach Brewery.
Hello to members of the council. So we've definitely noticed an increase in business from the Sip and Strolls. I think on art walk nights in particular, because we're not an art gallery, and throwing some paintings on the wall of the bar doesn't make it an art gallery. That we didn't get the kind of traffic from art walks that we did after the Sip and Stroll was started. So I think it's been very good to kind of break down some of the walls between the businesses. And I think there's I think as we saw the season go on, it kept getting better and better. And short of controlling the weather, I think continuing the program would be advantageous for all the businesses in the area. And I particularly like to thank the members of staff and folks who volunteer, because there's tons of volunteers that come out to make that possible. I think I've seen Mr. Wood up there with the vest on. So just want to thank everybody and hope we can keep doing it.
So you want to put the Sips, right?
Thanks, Chris. And lastly, we have Ms. Georgiana Granillo from Ravensburg.
Hello, everybody. My name is Georgiana. I'm here to talk about the positive experience that I've had with the Door Sip and Stroll. It's definitely been a positive impact for our business. Through these events, we have created a unique experience, built relationship, and increased our sales tremendously on these Sip and Stroll days. It's an easy way to support our small businesses, not only the ones that are participating in the Sip and Strolls, but also the ones along the routes during the Sip and Strolls. By building relationships and creating loyal customers who are more likely to return to our businesses when the Sip and Strolls are not going on. And last but not least is the sales. 1 month, for example, we had an increase of 623% over last year.
Oh my goodness.
And it was all because of the Sip and Strolls, the Door Sip and Strolls. So I feel like this is a great way, and it's a way to encourage socialization with people coming out, meeting people, business owners getting to know other people. And it's just a way to increase business in the winter months and also in the off season. So I'm totally for doing it again. Thank you.
Thank you. And to the off-season point, the 4 days selected, there are 2 from the kind of shoulder season and then 2 from the high season to kind of show you the differences, the different impacts it has. I hope through the 3 different data sources that are presented to council, that the $300 price tag pay to play is justifiable for next year with the same exact level of license. It has been determined that upgrading is likely not within the capacity of the volunteers available to do more than 16 next year. It seems like that's enough to have an impact, but not be too burdensome not to do. So we think staff thinks that's the sweet spot. And to confirm, there were some concerns brought up by council members before the first license was applied for regarding rise in violent crime or any other kinds of crime, littering. And in discussion with the chief, that was not the case. There was not a rise in crime at all related to the sip and stroller DORA. So there's really no concerns. It seems to be incredibly positive, and the price tag is only $300. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
I know one of the concerns that was brought up, and I can't remember in which meeting, but that people that were drinking in public and trying to cross the street would increase the danger of crossing the street. Can the chief speak to that? Has he seen any problem whatsoever, any different from any other Friday night?
I don't have any data compared to any other Friday night. I know one of the ABC requirements for the DORA is to have a safety person at every crosswalk, and the town did adhere to that, which thereby diminished any issues. I'm not aware of any issues that we had at the crosswalk during any DORA event.
Any other, you're not asking for, affirmation for the next permit, or are you asking for a vote?
Since the initial permit was a pilot program, which was specifically authorized by council before saying, we think that the ball should be in your court determining, based on the data, the pilot was successful, let's do it again. Since it was initially legislative action, that's why we're coming back, to ask you to authorize the municipal government to renew the license.
Later, I'd make that motion.
Sure.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? Yes, Ms. Williams?
I just had a question too. I know we keep talking about sip and stroll. Has there been any interest outside of sip and stroll for the DORA events? So it seems like it would, I know when we were sold this program that it was, seemed like more than just one specific event. Has there been any other interest?
So Sip and Stroll was the branding collaboration for all events using the DORA license. It was decided that was the most effective marketing strategy, was to pool resources and do that together in partnership with DCP. So we could still call it Sip and Stroll next year, which would probably be a wise idea from a branding perspective. But combining with other events strategically is a goal for us to look at more aggressively next year. DCP has indicated that they will not be willing to do as many events as they did this year due to volunteer fatigue. So the town will be strategically looking for those partnerships specifically related to those events and those organizations that might have access to different manpower than Downtown Columbia Beach does.
Okay, so, I mean, potentially could another nonprofit in town or organization that does events approach you to apply for this?
We would welcome that. I'll be sending letters asking people to do that very thing. So if there's anybody who's interested, please let us know. One person.
To David's point, the VFW does a beer fest, and they would have volunteers maybe. I mean, I don't know what their capability is, but that could be exactly kind of what.
And there could be fundraising opportunities too, like the volunteer fire department could do volunteers and put one of their big booths out and collect money on Town Hill, things like that. We are looking for those partnerships.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, all in favor of affirming to renew the license? Alright, great. So, yeah. Short-term rental zoning permit fee, Mr. Dooley.
Yes, ma'am.
And then we all get to take a little bit of a break because Tom got to stand up. So he,
I'll make this very quick. Under proposed Article 18-6B4 of the proposed short-term rental ordinance, the council is tasked with establishing a short-term rental zoning permit fee. As discussed in your staff report, staff is recommending a $50 permit fee to cover anticipated administrative costs. This is similar to Essex County. The planning commission was advised of the staff's proposed fee. There was no objection to that fee based on our discussion with the planning commission, but they did not formalize it in any sort of vote as it was beyond their approval authority. So to proceed with the proposed permit application fee, a public hearing must be held by the town council to formally consider the fee. Staff is recommending that the council direct a public hearing notice to be published in this manner for October 18, 2023. that concludes my presentation.
Good job, John. Okay, so, $50, and we have to hold a public hearing, which we'll bring this at the next work session anyway, so they can come up with that.
So moved.
Second.
All right, open for discussion. $50 good, more or less?
Is it business license plus this?
I believe so,
Yes,
yes.
sir. It's
They pay a business like a lot more, they pay a large business license fee than the short-term rentals do.
There's two fees that are being, this is the short-term rental for the zoning permit application on top of the existing business license fee, which is gonna be $30 up.
I think your point is lodging industries do not have to get a short-term rental application. This is only private residents.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Yeah. Any other discussion?
I personally think that sounds reasonable. I mean, at first I was like, well, this is not gonna cover the cost of town, but they also pay lodging tax, so I mean, some of that would be offset. And once we get a handle on this, we can always figure out in the future the cost needs to be adjusted. So I think it's a good compromise.
Yeah, I love the idea of auto renewals too. And you didn't say that the money. Okay, sounds good. All in favor? Any opposed? There you go. All right, we have closed session, but I'm gonna take a 10-minute recess. I'm gonna read this closed session. Give you just a second, guys. Just a second. All right, I move that the town council of the town of Quincy Beach, Virginia, convene a closed meeting for the following purpose to discuss the following subjects, all of which are exempt by Virginia law.
Excuse me, you need to finish this.
Thanks. I know, this is the boring part. All of which are exempt by Virginia law from public meeting requirements as indicated, namely pursuant to Virginia Code 2.23711A3, discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for public purpose or for the disposition of publicly held real property where discussion of the meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? All right, 10-minute recess, we'll come back to it. Thank you, sorry. Everybody gets excited to stand up. I get it.